Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me to have a chat to you. Misha, I don't know if you want to introduce why we're here and what we're here to talk about.
Yes, thank you very much, Ivan. It's wonderful. And thank you very much for allowing us this opportunity to discuss and hear your input. I think all of us are sitting on the edge of a seat wanting to open, um, but we don't have the expertise. So I have had a meeting with a few of the ECDs just to tell them exactly who you are, and that you've got the expertise to be able to guide us on how to go forward and how to legally open up the schools from a business point of view. So thank you very much for taking the time and for addressing us today.
All right, excellent. And please, ladies and gentlemen, I will mute your microphone, but please feel free to unmute your microphone when you need to, and also just use the chat facility. Type in any question, any comment, any expletive you want to. I've had them all, so it's not going to surprise me. Um, I want to start off by asking you a question. And Misha, I'm going to ask you only because you and I have the relationship, but anybody can chime in. When the president announced the lockdown in March, and a document was published in March, which was essentially the document which gave rise on the 25th of March. There was a government gazette that was published under the signature of the Minister of COGTA, that's Cooperative Governance. But in that particular document, there was very specifically an indication of the following. And this is why I'm struggling to understand why you are where you are at the moment. In the schedule of services, essential services, number 10, um, there was an essential service definition entitled Care Services, Social Relief of Distress Provided to Older Persons, Mentally Ill Persons with Disabilities, the Sick, and Children. So the argument is that from the very beginning, it was recognized that insofar at least of the children of essential care service members were concerned, provision was made for those individuals to have their children in care during the time of them providing their essential services to the greater public. That has not changed in the sense that with the publication on the 29th of April of the fourth version of those disability regulations, number 9 of Schedule B said exactly the same thing that I've just read out to you. So I want to start with a very brief question to you. Why is it that you guys have not, insofar as your care services are concerned, at least for essential service practitioner children, why have you not remained open? Has there been a directive, for example, that you had to close? Have you agreed amongst yourselves that you should have closed? Why is it that at this moment in time, you're not open, at least for purposes of the child services that you would be providing for essential service employees? Misha, I'm going to put this in your court just to get the ball rolling. Is there a reason? Have you been told not to do it? Have you been given a directive, for example, from Department of Social Services or any of those departments? I don't know if Anton's on the line, by the way. Anton, are you there?
Ivor, sorry, if I can jump in.
Yes, yes, Frank.
It's Frank. It's Frank here. Yeah. So we got a directive from the DG of Social Services on the 18th of March to say we all have to close. Thereafter, I had many discussions with the Western Cape Provincial Department of DSD to ask them if we can open, what's the story? And the only directive they ever referred me to was the president said, in terms of the National Disaster Act, blah, 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 you cannot open and you must remain closed. That's the only correspondence we ever got from them.
All right. Okay, so that's a good place to start. So the Director General in Department of Social Services sent out a directive to all childcare facilities and told you that number 9 of the essential service schedule of Annexure D was incorrect. I'm not putting words into his mouth or your mouth, but I'm saying essentially that's what he told you.
Yeah, probably.
All right. Did you discuss this amongst yourselves? Did you discuss strategy amongst yourselves? Frank, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, so please forgive me for my question. All right. So let's go back. Can somebody please tell me what your businesses generally are? What do they do? Are they schools?
Yes, mine is a school.
Okay, so there are some of you who are schools. Are there
Early childhood, yes. I feel
Not Christians.
ECD institutions?
Yeah,
we all nursery schools.
Okay, hold on. These are all different. So you're nursery schools?
I'm a nursery school. I also got a aftercare.
Aftercare facilities. Okay. Anything else? So we've got schools, we've got ECD institutions, nursery schools, aftercare facilities. Anything else?
I think they all fall under the same blanket.
Yes.
Basically, we childcare services, so we offer care, we offer an educational program. We all very similar then obviously the aftercare facilities for aftercare children coming from primary schools, but ECDs, nursery schools, schools as we're calling it, we all sort of under the same blanket of early childhood development, which is care plus education.
So
that's how I understand it as well. All of us has to fall under the early childhood development, even aftercare centers or ECDs.
Okay, so again, I'm going to say this, and I'm just going to mute you just for a second because there's bad feedback coming from somebody. There we go. I'm just going to say this. The regulation says care services, social relief of distress provided to older persons, mentally ill persons with disabilities, the sick, and children. So if we read it, care services for children, would you agree collectively that you are care services, at the very least, that you are care services for children? If you were not schools, ECD institutions, nursery schools, aftercare facilities, or childcare services, you are at least, I'm going to say 9 care services for children. Would you at least agree that that's who you are?
We legally registered as partial care facilities.
What makes you partial care facilities?
Meaning that the children don't sleep on our premises. We're given certain hours so that we're allowed to trade. So we legally call partial care services.
So we would say partial daycare services, really?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Fair enough. So that's our starting point. So let me ask you another question. Have any of you gone onto BizPortal to seek a certificate from BizPortal to be recognized under point 9 of the schedule?
No, I don't think we have.
No, I haven't. I did it for my other school, but not for my ECD center.
What happened when you went on for your other school? What happened for you?
So I have a private school that is from grade R until grade 12, and nothing happened. It asked me the industry that I was in. This happened on the 3rd of May or the 4th of May. It asked me the industry that I was in. I got a certificate kicked out, and then a guideline to issue permits. And from that point, I then issued permits to all my staff.
Okay,
and I
so you've answered my question. You've answered my question. You literally got a certificate to open your school.
Correct.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, what you need to trade in terms of the regulations is this. You need a this would be under level 4 and level 5. We're not even talking level 3, which will be a lot easier, but we haven't got the gazetted result yet. We're expecting it hopefully in an hour's time. But the point I'm trying to make to you is that what you need to trade is you need a BizPortal certificate so that if you are raided by a policeman or a member of the Defence Force, you can say, there's my BizPortal certificate to trade. And I am trading in terms of Annexure D of number 43258, the Gazette, which was published on the 29th of April, and it was published again, by the way, on the 1st of May. Point number 9, page 36. We are care services for children. So I am saying to you, and this is with respect, and certainly with due respect to the social services department, etc., etc. This regulation allows you to trade as a child care service, and I appreciate the fact that it's a partial daycare service, absolutely. And more importantly, what it should be doing is it should be saying that the association within which you are members, and we'll talk about the nature of that association a little later, but the association within which you are members is an association which should be giving you standard operating protocols for how you should be trading, posters that you can put up all over your facility to your employees and to your customers or your clients who are the parents of the children, that you should have the right protocols in place for thermometer scanning, for quarantine, whatever the requirements are as you move through your activities. But all I'm trying to say to you is that that self-governing quality assurance mechanism is very definitely a function that should be performed by your association, or at least by provincial groupings of yourself, so that you're not waiting for anybody else to flip the switch on allowing you to practice. So again, it might very well be that we need formally to respond to the Director General of Social Services, but whatever their directive was not a directive in terms of the disaster fund regulations, which, as they themselves say, take precedent over any other departmental activity. Now, I'm not saying there isn't a process involved, because obviously, of course, there is a process involved. There's a process of communication, there's a process of engagement, etc. All I'm trying to say is my recommendation to you collectively is start that process, because you haven't begun that process. All right. Before I begin, and sorry, let me again reintroduce myself. My name is Ivor Blumenthal. I was approached and asked to run this webinar, and the intention is to obviously run more intensive activities with you down the line. But as things stand at this moment in time, my reason for talking to you is threefold. A review of the current disaster regulations and how they can be interpreted for childcare business community, number one. Number two, the need to create, affiliate, and empower a business employer association for your industry. And number three, if you rent, managing your existing leases and landlords in the time of COVID-19. So if you rent as opposed to own your own property. Those are the three reasons that we wanted to have this informal discussion. This is not a webinar, it's not a presentation to you, it's an informal discussion. And as I say, my name is Ivor Blumenthal. Before I carry on, are there any comments or any questions about what I've said? Because when I spoke about the business, I think I've said quite a lot, and it might be something that someone wants to either take issue with or ask a question about. Anton,
thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry, I was off a little bit. My internet kicked out. But I would just like to say thank you very much for your input. But just tell me a little bit about what is our relationship with the Children's Act at this point in time, because the Children's Act under the Department of Social Development they are the people that are the custodians of the Act, and we have to register with them. And in that context, we have to function under the Children's Act and all the regulations going with that. Now, are you saying that we can, while we are under the disaster management, that Act is now kind of held to one side, and the disaster management is what should give us our direction?
No, what I am saying to you is that the Children's Act is what has given you license to practice as a creche or an early childhood development business or a partial daycare service. So you've got your license from a professional perspective to practice in terms of the Children's Act. But the Children's Act does not talk to your business, and your business has been put into lockdown, not by the Children's Act, but by the disaster management regulations, which were published in and have been through 4 iterations, the latest of which was 29th of April. So I'm saying that unless the Children's Act has prescribed that for professional reasons you were not allowed to practice, that the disaster regulation would have put your business into lockdown and stopped you from operating unless you were specified on the essential services annexure, which is annexure D of the most recent publication, and you are specified under annexure D B9 as being allowed to practice, unless the Children's Act that you are referring to, which gives you your professional license, has come back to you and said, as a care service for children, we are prohibiting you from trading.
I
Sorry, is
understand,
your
yes.
background legal? Is it a legal background that you come from?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, what?
Anton, can I just ask you, on the 25th of May, you sent out a notice on your association to say that per DSD we weren't allowed to open. Was that an official letter that you received from them, or because we all followed that? So there was something sent out that according to DSD, no early childcare development centres were allowed to open.
I'm sorry, was that
Maybe if
a
I could
question?
jump in there, it's Arno here. Yes, indeed. That was the directive from Department of Social Development, and that is what they communicated to us, and that's why we posted that on Facebook, that letter. Now, yeah, so it came from them.
So they did come back to us.
So can we be specific about this? That you were given a directive by the Department of Social Development that those of you who are registered as early childhood development businesses, or in fact all partial daycare services, this is quite an important distinction. Was the prohibition on all partial daycare services, or alternatively just specific elements of partial daycare services?
I can't remember the exacts of it, but I would believe that it would include all partial care centers, which any ECD, aftercare, nursery school, crèche, preschool, everything falls under partial care, so it would include everything.
All right, can I just ask a follow-up question then? Once you got that directive from them, has there been subsequent communication with them in relation to the Gazette?
No, not that I'm aware of. No.
All right, fine. So then our first port of call is to do this. Our first port of call in writing is to go back to whoever sent you the letter, the Director General of Social Services, and to say to them, we are perplexed because Annexure D B9 specifically says that care services for children should be in operation. As per your directive to us, which was a blanket directive, you prohibited us from being in operation. Who currently are looking after the children of essential services workers, number one? And number two, how do we explain the contradiction between the Gazette on the one hand and your directive on the other hand? So that's a critically important question.
That makes wonderful sense as well. I think that's a good idea. They did not release an official document stating that. It's only when we were in meetings with them that it was stated, but they did not release an official document from DSD saying that.
Ivan, another thing also that's just also very important is if you look at SA Child.
It's Misha.
Yes, it's Misha, sorry. With regards to SA Child, they are an association. By law, we do not have to belong to them. And I personally have not received any document from DSD from a person who is a registered school. And if I didn't belong to SA Child and noticed what happened on their Facebook page, I personally would not have received the document. So
Me too.
I have also got the thing that if they don't communicate directly with you as a legal operator, then how should you know? Because you don't have to belong to SA Child Association.
So Misha, there's just one more thing you need to ask, and that is this. Sorry, I'm just going to mute all your microphones again just because there's some feedback coming through. So there's one more thing you need to ask, and that is this, that unless the department has literally gazetted the instruction to you to stop working, in other words, if it was a subject of a government gazette publication, the same government gazette process that I'm reading out to you now, unless that has happened, there is no directive that you should be operating under. Now, having said that, it doesn't. There's no use in going backwards. We need to look forward, and looking forward means this: that it is a case of saying that if there is a test case that someone goes onto BizPortal, gets a certificate because of your registration number in BizPortal under DB9, then automatically everybody will be doing that, because we will say to you, everyone should be doing it immediately, and you therefore have your certificates to be in operation. Then what we should do is we should be engaging with the Department of Social Services, where we ask them specifically, we say to them, you sent us this letter on the following date. Could you please refer us to the government gazette where this instruction was published? Because there is a conflict of interest. And so you begin the engagement process that way. One of the things you would also want to do is write to the COGTA, which is the Cooperative Governance Ministry that is in charge of the disaster regulations, and say to them that we have taken it upon ourselves to respect your lockdown. However, with essential service workers having to go back to work, our question to you is, who is taking care of these children? So that we open an avenue for COGTA to actually sit down with us and say, we want, in a matter of days, we want to announce to the world that childcare services are up and running. Because otherwise what's going to happen is every employer out there now, because remember what happens from Monday, 8 million people go back to work. Who's taking care of the children of those 8 million people? So all I'm trying to say is...
Can I comment on that, please, Ivor?
Yes,
it's Anganeta speaking.
Hello, Anganeta.
I just want to comment.
Anganeta?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Okay. I've been inundated with parents. My preschool and aftercare center has a lot of teachers, children, number one. Teachers all have to be back by Monday, or they've already started. And then grade 7 pupils are starting as well. So I have a whole lot of grade 7 aftercare kids, and the parents don't know where to send their children. Except for that, I'm 2 blocks from Unitas Hospital with a whole lot of nurses as well, part of my preschool. So I've really been in quite a struggle to try and accommodate all these parents. So I'd just like your thoughts on that.
I know there was somebody else who wanted to say something.
Yeah, that's me, please, Ivan, if I can. Anton.
Yes, Anton.
We have sent a proposal to government, in actual fact, most probably about 4 weeks ago or more, signed by 2,400 nursery schools, stating that we asked them to allow us to open for essential workers. After that, they brought in another 1.5 million allowed workers, and now they're going to bring in another 8 million workers. We sent emails to each minister we could, to each department, to the COVID Council. We never received even received an acknowledgement of receipt. There's just no way, and that's what's the frustrating thing, is that I understand that we're an association, not all schools need to join us, and that's fine, because during this time we've not worked for our own members only. We've been openly working for anyone that's in this ECD field. But you don't have a voice. That's the problem. That's
all
the
right.
thing
So,
that really
Anton, I'm gonna play devil's advocate here, and I'm gonna say that one of the principles in law is I'm gonna send you a proposal, and if you don't come back to me with a proposal, then I'm going to take it that your silence is acquiescence. So that's a general legal thing. Now, you've written to lots of government departments. There is no government gazette which directs that you cannot be trading. There is a government gazette that directs you should be trading. And so, Anton, I'm going to say to you, it's enough now. Sorry,
Okay.
You don't know me from a bar of soap, or whatever.
Yeah.
But the point I'm saying to you now, I'm taking the lead here on this one, and I'm saying, Anton, we are now going to do the following. We are going to say to our members, this is what we've done, this is the action we've done, and now consequently, because we don't want a disaster from Monday, these are the steps we're taking. Number one, we are acting in terms of the Government Gazette published 43258 DB9, number one. Number two, we are going to make sure, and I know you've done this already, we're going to make sure that we have an entire SOP process in place, and that all of our members have signed up to that SOP process by, let's say, Monday the 8th, for argument's sake. And I'll explain why I say by Monday the 8th in a minute, okay? So the first point we're making is that we are reopening. The second point we're making is that we are taking responsibility for making sure that there's a standard SOP set of activities. There are posters that have been distributed and going up all over the place. There is PPE equipment, which includes the thermostat scanning facility, as well as masks and gloves and whatever else we can and might need to put in place. And there's a medium-term plan as well to make sure that we complete what we can't do in the beginning. There is a training activity which needs to take place for all staff. It can be an online training activity like this. It can even be over the cell phones. It doesn't matter. But we're guiding that training activity to be taking place. Then, more importantly, we're doing peer-to-peer evaluations, which means that in a particular area where there are 50 nursery schools or 50 facilities, we're asking for 10 people to volunteer their time so that they can literally do an on-site inspection in groups of 2 amongst themselves of all 50, and once a month maybe, or even once every 2 months, sign off on that peer-to-peer evaluation. So that's a quality assurance mechanism that you need in place. And then what you need to do is you need to have an arrangement with a local clinic or a local hospital that says, if we pick up anybody who is over 37, can we admit them to you? Can we send them to you immediately for you guys to, in other words, our quarantine thing is we don't have a facility. We will separate them from the rest of the employees or the rest of the kids. We will immediately notify their parents, but we will have already asked their parents to sign an indemnification, which allows us to get them to the local hospital or the local doctor or medical practice. You have to have that in place, all right? But all I'm trying to say, Anton, is you put that in place. You take the lead. You send a letter to your members that can go out to all of the parents to say that we are opening on the 1st, so that between the 1st and 8th, we're putting all of these things in place, including all the training. We will be open for business on the 8th. And I'm just using a week. You could say, well, we want to do it in 2 or 3 days. It's absolutely up to you. But all I'm saying is we take the lead here, because we're not waiting for the department. We're not waiting for anybody else to come back to us. The critical thing is testing BizPortal to make sure that at least one gets a certificate, because if one gets a certificate and everybody else is registered as a business with the CIPC in exactly the same way, everybody else will get the same certificate. Now, that can, by the way, be managed through the association as well. It's just what your resources are like and how much of a community you have to start serving in this particular regard. I've said a lot, so I'll take questions and answers now. Elise, I see you're online. Do you want to say something?
Yes, my husband wrote a lot of letters. You know, there was not even a response to that. And he also said that we are supposed to function under the essential service.
Yes,
we
that's
are
what I
an
just read to
essential
you.
service, actually. And we suppose, actually, we was one of those that was supposed to open first with the essential, or stay open with the essential services people.
And what happened?
Nothing. They didn't even. Well, my husband sent. I think it was the trade industry, something like trade industry.
Department of Trade and
then
Industries, yes.
Yes, and then they sent it to to the Department of Social Development. They didn't even acknowledge or say we received your email. Nothing.
All right, so I'm going to say this again. Silence is acquiescence. Oh, and sorry, there's another thing I want us to agree to do, Anton, and please, you can cut off the call now if I overstep the mark. But one of the things I want us to do is this. I need us to use a public relations campaign to immediately get out to the media and explain to the media why we're doing what we're doing. That we've spent 2 months lockdown. We have teachers, we have hospital workers, nurses who are unable to focus at work because of the fact that their kids are at home without anyone looking after them. And the bottom line is we've written letter after letter after letter. We've contacted government minister after government minister after government minister. The only gazetted regulation is the one I've quoted from you. That's why we're acting as we act. I'm telling you that it will, first of all, it will immediately win hearts and minds. I'm very happy to direct that campaign with you, but I think it's critically important that the one goes with the other, because then it really is for all those ministries to come back and say, well, this is what we said to you. You know, we sent you emails, we sent you letters, and we'll deal with that publicly. All I'm trying to say is you need to go on the offensive to be able to keep your businesses going, but also to be able to keep the faith of your customers who are the parents of the children you've taken care of. And that's all I'm saying.
May I please come in here? May I just say something else that is also bothering me? My parents said to me yesterday, I had an illegal meeting. My parents said yesterday to me that they have to make use, they have to make use of childminders. Now, my problem with the childminder problem, their problem with the childminder, and also our concern is this: the childminders come from everywhere, and they are looking to 3 or 4 or 5 children, or 3 or 4 or 5 homes. Why are they allowed to look after, let's say, 7 or 8 children coming from wherever they are coming?
Elise, they are not allowed to.
Elise,
they are not allowed to. So in short, they are breaking the law. So let's talk about childminders. Let me just finish my point. Let's just talk about childminders just for a second. So it's very specific. The regulations are very specific. If you've got a sick child at home, or there's a sick adult, etc., all the person is live in, then now, in terms of a week ago, and only a week ago, they would be entitled to come and do their work one-on-one, or if it's a household, in other words, there are 4 children in a house, then possibly yes. But certainly in terms of alternating as a childcare facility, absolutely illegal. No question about that. Sorry.
May I tell you?
Yes.
Yeah. May I say to you that of the 100 preschool children that I have, that about 70% on Monday is going to be taken care by a childminder. And nobody is going to know that. I know that. But nobody is. What about the other schools? It's the same is going to happen.
All right. So let me say this to you as well. Well, I'm not going to talk about the Competition Act. I'm not going to talk about the fact that the government at the moment is flying in the face of the Competition Commission and the Competition Court by allowing that to happen. That should be one of the things. I'm just going to mute everyone's microphone for a second. That should be one of the things that you're taking up with the Department of Trade and Industry as a matter of urgency. Because in fact, what they are doing is they're saying, we're actually going to create a transformation solution here. We're going to close down the existing daycare facilities, and we're going to allow all of these people who have got nothing to do to start looking after children, not having to be registered, not having to be any ECD license whatsoever. And that is an illegality, and you need to tackle that illegality on a completely different footing. The illegality is a Competition Commission illegality. Okay, sorry. I know there was somebody else who said, can they say something?
Ivor, can I just make a comment, please, and then ask you something? You have spoken about we need our members to stand together. Of course, we need to see what the risk is and how will we manage that risk if the South African police steps in or the government steps in any way. But we need to be collective. I want to say that SA Childcare Association is available to be a vehicle to drive this thing, and nobody needs to marry us or to stay with us or whatever. But we have a vehicle. We've got infrastructure staff. We've got all the documentations that we have in place, and I believe that we should go with what you are saying, with what we can do. I love the fact that you help us and with the public relations and the media exercise. I believe that we should finish. We should just jump on it now, as you've said. And if we've got some form of backing in terms of what the government said in the stuff they published, then I'm happy. I want to say SA Childcare Association is on board 100%.
So,
if I may also jump in here, Ivan.
Yes, that's honor, right?
Yes, correct. We have done a poll of ECD schools that will have to, that will close the question was ECD schools will have to reopen now, otherwise. And then the answers was, when will my school close? I can't, in terms of cash flow, I can't keep it open. So what's scary is that 41% of the schools will close by end of June if they can't open. And so if our poll is correct, that is a big crisis, because at the end of the day, if almost, and again, if at the end of May, 19% said they're going to have to close their doors. Now, if that's the case, we're looking at 60% of schools that's going to close if we can't open within the next few days.
No, I have a question for you and Anton, if I may.
Of course. That's Sandra, right?
Yes, Sandra, hi. So one of the things that's, in my opinion, that is keeping us from getting feedback from Department of Social Development is the absolute backlog that they've got in re-registering the creches. So, for instance, Anu and Anton and Maxi knows my file have been on the desk of Marinda Oosthuizen for, I think, 9 months now. Now, we have to re-register our schools. I am nervous that if we go this portal route, that they might realize how many schools are waiting for the re-registration from the department. And we've done everything from our sides. We are operating according to the guidelines, but they are not getting back to us. Is this
Sandra,
not a valid point that maybe...
Can you just say what you're nervous about? I didn't get the point that you're nervous about.
I can jump in there if you like.
Yes, please, Anton, you will understand.
Right.
Arno, in terms of you need to be registered with the Department of Social Development to be legal, if you like. So if you are not, there is more than the majority of schools operate illegally, if you like, because they are not registered with DSD. Now, the whole process to register with DSD is a long one. It's they, you know, again, they need to do things which they don't do. Then the files stay there for years on end. Things is not in place. So sometimes the problem lies with DSD to get the schools registered. But in terms of the law, if you're not a registered school with DSD, you are illegal. And I think that's what Sandra is saying. There might be an issue if we now say, all right, we're going to open, and you are not a registered school, then you're actually illegal.
All right.
Or is that the case?
So there are two questions.
Say, no, you're another entity.
So there are two questions. The first question is about your individual status. In other words, if you were registered, if you've complied timeously with what's required for re-registration, if the backlog is being caused by the department, then you will retain your registration until such time as they've processed your application. Now, that's in terms of the public administration and justice. If they try and do something against you without having formalized the processing of your application, you have what is referred to as a PAJA action, a public administration justice action against them. The easiest way to sort it out is you write to them. You say to them, we are up for re-registration. We've submitted all the following documents to you on the following day. And until such time as we hear back from you, in one way or another, we will continue to trade. So you put the ball in their court and you leave it in their court. Whatever they then do, we will deal with as an association on a class basis, because it's unlikely, Sandra, that they will go for you, but not for Arno or for Anton, which means that we will have 100 or 200 or 1,000 that we'll have to deal with on a class basis, and we'll deal with that. There's a procedural mechanism in public administration that will allow us to deal with that. But that has absolutely nothing to do with shutting you down. If, however, you do not have a license to practice and you've not had a license to practice in the past and you've been practicing, then we can't help you. I'm sorry to sound so crass. Of course, we can help you. And of course, we'll have a program to phase you into registration. And of course, we'll approach the department and ask them to recognize your category of practitioner. And as an association, we'll assume a part of the role for quality assurance until such time as they've signed it off. We'll make those things happen because that's what an association does. However, if you don't have a certificate to practice and you're not prepared to get one to practice, then you can't help. You shouldn't be a member of the association. You shouldn't be practicing. And in fact, it should be the association going after you to close you down and not the department. Because if we want to say we're self-governing, then unfortunately, that's how you self-govern. You have standards, you have a code of ethics, and you govern to your own code of ethics. But if, Sandra, you were registered, and every time you had to re-register, you've done what you needed to do. And this time they're holding us back. We put them on the defensive. We put them on the response, not the other way around.
Ivor,
Ivor, thank you.
As I have it, apparently as long as you, yes, as long as you can prove that you've submitted all your documentation, as long as you can prove that you are in the process of registration, apparently then it's quite legal to carry on with the
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's what public administration and justice says. It says that if you have made a timelier submission which has not been responded to, then you don't bear the responsibility for the consequences of not being registered. Absolutely. So I think that's absolutely critical to do. The one thing I did want to say, and I've actually put it on the screen as well under the purple thing or whatever, but the one thing I did want to do is say this. What we want to do, and I'm happy to do this overnight for you, but what we want to do is create a petition that you can get your parents to sign. Because if there are, for argument's sake, if there are 100 of you guys, and I know there are thousands, but if there was 100 of your creches out there, and on average there were 20 parents per creche, that means we would have 100 times 20 petition responses that would form part of our application. Our application, by the way, is not going to the department. Our application is going to the Portfolio Committee on Social Services, so that the Portfolio Committee on Social Services will call in the department and say to the department, why did you do this? And that's what we want.
Ivor, if I could jump in there as well, we did a parents poll, and there was 9,994 parents that signed, and we actually stopped the survey after that, and almost about 80% of all parents wanted the schools to open, so giving certain conditions. Some of them just straightforward said open up now, and that's 35% of the parents, and only 15% said no, keep it closed. So the vast majority of parents want the schools, the ECDs or the nursery schools to open. And we have proof of that. We have the data and the email addresses of all their parents.
Anna, can I play devil's advocate and ask you this? Number one, are you and your members ready to trade and open up? And let me ask all my questions, then you can answer me. Number two, have you spoken to either individually insurance brokers or collectively the insurance ombudsman about the extension of cover, or at least your existing cover, and whether it's adequate or not? Because that is critically important in a public campaign, that number one, that the association will certify the ready businesses, the businesses that are trading ready, based on the principles of your SOP being met with. And number two, the fact that you've got indemnification insurance cover from your insurance agents and brokers. Has any of those discussions taken place?
Ivor, can I?
In terms of the insurance, no.
Sorry, Arno first and then Sandra.
In terms of the insurance, no. The first question I actually missed it. I think my internet.
All right. So my first question, my first question is this. So you've done your SOPs, you've got your SOPs out to your members, etc. Is there a quality assurance mechanism in place, or can we put a quality assurance mechanism in place, let's say within the next week or even 2 weeks, that will give parents the assurance that there is a quality assurance activity that takes place on top of the creche or the business, so that they can be assured that we're taking all and any precautions that we can actually be taking.
Yes, definitely.
All right, Sandra?
Yeah, there's documentation that we've sent out, and we've got all the protocols and all the quality assurance, and it's based on international best practices. So I believe the question you asked is, are we ready to open? Yes, most of the schools, nursing schools, are ready to open within a week or so. The guys have been getting PPEs together, and everyone has done a lot of work and a lot of developmental stuff. So yes, I believe the answer is yes, we can open within 1 week, within 2 weeks, we can open, but the indemnity insurance is something that we've not looked at.
All right, I would say that, sorry, Sandra, I would say that the easiest thing to do then is you get from each of your members, you get a list of who their insurance brokers are. One standard letter goes out from the association to those insurance brokers saying we need a simple answer from you. Either we're covered or we're not covered. If we're not covered, what's it going to take to cover us?
Ivan, Sophia?
Oh, sorry, Sophia. Yes, did you say Sophia or Sandra?
Sandra.
Oh, sorry, Sandra. Sorry. Right, go for it.
I would just another point about the insurance. The indemnity is one thing, but my experience was with Santam that our business interruption insurance that we've been paying for years, those claims were rejected outright.
Yeah, we know.
We were
Everybody,
given
the entire
absolutely-
economic sector.
Yeah.
So there is a class action coming. There is a class action coming.
Okay.
One of the things that I would like the association to do, completely separate to everything else we've spoken about, but one of the things I would like the association to do is literally give you a one-page formula sheet to be completing on your actual business losses during lockdown, and more importantly, your calculation of the recovery period, because there is a class action coming against all insurance companies and insurance brokers. And why do I say that? Because the reality is that the insurance sector in South Africa knew 10 years ago that there was a pandemic coming of one form or another. They had small exposure to MERS, to SARS, et cetera, et cetera. They actually made an allowance for two specific sectors, the chemical sector and the mining sector. 10 years ago, they made an allowance to cover them for business interruption in the case of force majeure, particularly pandemic. But they then conspired amongst themselves as insurance companies and then with the insurance brokers not to make those facilities available to you generally, because of the cost and the impact it would have on them as an insurance sector, despite the fact that people or companies were prepared to pay a premium for that additional kind of cover. That was never offered to you. So the reality is you were sold business interruption cover under false pretenses, or rather, under incomplete pretenses. So there is a class action coming. You do need to start in your mind saying, this is how much money we lost in March, in April, in May, because remember, you can do it prior to lockdown as well, based on the fact that people weren't sending their kids to you because they knew that the pandemic was here, but there hadn't been a lockdown declared. But it's happening. And we need to involve all of you in it because it has a critical impact on you as small businesses.
Abel, can I ask a question, please?
Of course, Sarah.
So I was included in some SASA documentation that went out. SASA is the Independent Schools Association of South Africa. Initially, there was this mass panic when everybody closed down, and I ended up being part of a group, a WhatsApp group, where SASA had been sending out information to their members. Now, we are not an SASA affiliated school, but my number got added onto their WhatsApp group. And just recently, they sent out two bits of correspondence that I found very interesting. The first was that they inquired with all of their SASA registered schools whether or not their scholar accident insurance would still be applicable under the current global pandemic. And every single one of those schools has come back to say that their school scholar accident insurance was not going to be covered. Well, COVID wouldn't be covered at all. And that unless the school signed an acknowledgement of that, their insurance would immediately be cancelled. So, for example, when my son was at Westville Boys High, I'm a preschool in Durban, my son went to Westville, I had to sign scholar accident insurance for him, and that would have automatically been cancelled across all the schools unless the schools acknowledged that COVID-19 was excluded in that insurance, number one. Preschools like us, we've never had that type of scholar insurance before, and I've had my school for the last 16 years, so that is not even applicable to us. I've got business insurance, and I was told outright by my insurer that business interruption would not be covered. And then the second thing that I found very interesting was that SASSA has sent out correspondence to its members saying that because the independent schools have always acted autonomously, so they've fallen under the umbrella of the Department of Education and the Department of Social Development, because most of these bigger private schools have got ECD sites on their properties. So they used to be grade 1 to grade 7 or grade 12, and they've slowly started introducing younger grades, so grade R, grade 00, 000, and even quadruple 0, so a fully fledged ECD site. Those schools have been, SASSA has said to their members that those schools can be operational as long as they comply with the standing operation procedures that have been sent out. Now, I can't quite understand, and as you've been explaining to us all along, how this is working. In majority of us on this webinar right now are standalone, independent, registered private preschools. We are not associated to the Crawfords or the Currows or the bigger schools like that. We're standalone, but we are properly registered, and we are well equipped to be able to deal within the standard operating procedures that the department has sent out, and with the documentation that SA Childcare Association sent out to its members. They sent this out quite a while ago, just saying, guys, get yourselves ready, have a look at this documentation, see how you can work it into your school so that when we do get given the go-ahead to open, we can open. I just want to try and understand, how do we, as standalone schools, go ahead and open our doors when there just seems to be so much misinformation going around? And how do we make sure that we are going to be covered in the long run?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Somebody does come and knock on your door.
Sarah, that is precisely what I'm saying to you. I'm saying to you that you don't. So a number of things has to happen next week. Number one, we've got to make sure you're all ready to open. The SOPs that you've received from your association are in place. You've got to have a mechanism for assessing, neutrally assessing, not asking you to tell us they're in place, but for us to be able to check they're in place in one way or another. That's the first thing.
Sure.
It's because we have to be seen to be self-governing and accountable, more importantly. Then what we have to do is we have to, as a matter of urgency, we have to be communicating with your insurance brokers and with your insurance companies, because you cannot open your doors unless you have some kind of cover. Now, what happens in the situation where one kid is admitted, he has a snotty nose, next thing you know, 50 of your kids are now all infected? Where's the indemnification? So obviously we're going to have something at the front door that says, you know, any kid that walks away from this place COVID positive has got nothing to do with us. It's not our problem. We're indemnifying ourselves to some extent or another against it. But more importantly, by law, you have to have cover, indemnification cover. So if it's excluded, the parents have to know before their kids come to your premises that there is no indemnification cover for purposes of COVID. But the problem you've got is that from a trading perspective, from a law perspective, that irrespective of whether you've got that form up on the wall or not, you're not allowed to contract out of indemnification. So there is an issue we have to deal with here with the insurance companies before you can open your doors. I would have assumed it's been dealt with, and we need to deal with it because it hasn't been dealt with. But it's an extremely important point that we're making here, and we have to be mature about it. So the bottom line is, if we go out to the world at large and we're saying that your daycare facilities are not opening on the 1st, but they will open on the 10th, which gives us enough time to put the following in place, including indemnification cover, then we send a signal out to the insurance sector. We need to know that the insurance sector across the board are prepared to be Zooming with us by Wednesday morning, and we want an answer to some extent or another. If they say no, we're not covering anything to do with COVID. We know we've got a problem. We then need to go back to the public at large, and we need to say the following insurance companies have said to us they're not covering indemnification, and that affects the following crashes, because we need to play open cards. You cannot go into a trading situation where you could very well cause death and destruction in a family without eyes wide open as far as those recipients. They have to sign an indemnification form for their kid to come to your school, which says, if my little Johnny contracts COVID, God forbid, and something happens to him, I will not hold this establishment accountable. And the problem is that from a legal point of view, it's questionable about whether that indemnification would be enforceable or not without some kind of insurance cover. So all I'm trying to say is we need to clean that up next week on the one hand, while at the same time we're making sure that there's a institutional certification activity, a simple one in place, which then says to the parents and to the public at large, the following creches and daycare centers are ready to trade. Everything is in place. So there's work that needs to be done. And I'm suggesting then that if you collectively, or even just some of you want to do it, it's worth doing, but it has to be done.
Ivor, could I comment something there, please?
Of course, Anjanita.
The comment I'd like to make is just so that everyone doesn't freak out too much about parents and liability, because the parents also have to prove that the child got COVID at your preschool, which I think is quite a difficult. I'm not saying there shouldn't be indemnity, of course there should be, but it's quite difficult to prove that it specifically happened at your school, because that would be what they have to do from their side.
You're 100% correct. We just never want to get into that. Let's be honest about that. That's not a discussion we want to get into. There has been an argument, and funnily enough, that argument came from COSATU, but there has been an argument that there should be a COVID-free passport that employees carry around with them to be able to access the workplace. And believe it or not, like I say, that proposal came from COSATU. And you know what you might be saying is that maybe we need the same kind of medical certificate from a doctor prior to the person coming into our workplace, so that we know that if anything happens in the course of their exposure in the workplace, it's just very difficult to manage. It's almost impossible to manage, but you need an engagement at least on the issue to show that you're putting your mind to it.
And then just
can I ask you?
All right, sorry, Sarah, yes?
Okay, I just wanted to find out. So government schools are going back. Grades 7 and grade 12 are meant to be starting school on the 1st of June. What insurance cover do those schools have in place? And is there not a possibility that our sector could look at exactly the same thing? Because, as far as I know, and it's come through the ASASA documentation, is that unless the schools acknowledge on their scholar accident indemnity that COVID-19 will not be covered, the school's insurance is going to be cancelled, which effectively means that no school is insured, not one. Not us as ECD sector, as standalone private schools, not as the big schools such as Curragh or Crawfords or any of the other big schools that are out there. No one is going to be covered here for this, which essentially means then that nobody should be open and operational, because nobody is going to be covered. Because the insurers across the board have been very specific. In terms of business interruption, COVID is not covered. And in terms now of the scholar accident indemnity insurance, that 99% of the either the Model C schools or the private schools have in place. I do not know about the fully fledged government schools. I don't even know if they've got.
So Sarah, can I say this to you?
Scholar insurance, but no one's covered.
Okay, so let me say this to you, that obviously we have to have an engagement. Obviously, we have to speak to the insurance ombudsman on the one hand, but we have to actually get to the insurance association. We have to have an urgent engagement with them. If there are, for argument's sake, 30,000 of you guys out there, then we are talking about a significant sector of the economy upon which all essential services depend. So we can very definitely make an urgent case with the Association of Insurance Companies to sit down as a matter of urgency. There's no question about that. and then together with them knock out some kind of a solution, because unless they can give indemnification cover, and we might have to ask the Minister of Trade and Industry to intervene, because unless they can give some kind of indemnification cover, at least to those companies that have been their clients for 6 months or even a year or longer, unless they can give that kind of cover, you cannot, and Sarah, I cannot stress this enough, you cannot open your doors. So we have to sort this thing out, and we have to sort it out quickly. In fact, it is the most important issue. These things have to happen on a parallel basis, but this is the most critical issue.
Okay.
Could I just ask something?
Sorry, all right, Liesl, yes?
Good morning. Sorry, I joined the meeting a little bit late. Are we suggesting that we are going to override the Minister of Social Development directive and open the school, all 3 schools, on the 1st of June?
No, we're not saying that at all. What we're saying is... Okay. Sorry, I'm just going to cut out everybody's background here. Just give me a second. Okay, let me just cut that out. So, listen, what we are saying is this. We are saying that there has been no government gazetted directive, number 1. Number 2, the only government gazette legislation which currently applies, because it's being gazetted, and because we are in a state of disaster, and in a state of disaster, COGTA takes supremacy over all the other government departments, is that under Annexure D, B9, care services for children is specifically regarded as an essential service, number 1. Number 2, only those companies which are able to obtain a business portal certificate, in other words, a CIPC certificate, which classifies you as an essential service in terms of 9, will be allowed to open. And more importantly, we're not saying open on the 1st. We're saying that from the 1st, we will work towards a date to open. Now, if you take the Minister of Higher Education and Training, what he said about schools going back, or rather universities going back, for their candidates who could go back, he said it will start on the 1st. We will take 2 weeks to get the schools ready, and then those students will come back. It's exactly the same thing you want to be saying about your membership.
I have a question.
Of course, Elizabeth.
On the BES portal, the CIPC, is that not confined to companies? Because many of us operate as trusts or props and all sorts of different legal vehicles.
So the CIP, the business portal, is responsible for issuing trading certificates for businesses that are registered in terms of all of these essential service categories. Now, irrespective of whatever you are currently registered as, you also have a CIPC certificate.
I don't think we do. I mean, I don't know if I've missed something.
By law, you have to.
I've got a CIPC certificate. So yeah, because you have to, if you pay UIF or something for your staff, you have to register with the CIPC.
Oh, okay. All right.
Your accountant will have it if you don't.
Yes, yeah, your accountants or anybody working with that kind of stuff will have it. My question is just under the BES portal, under which service do we have to register then to get a permit?
Well, you're registered under essential services, and you're registered under essential services B9.
B9. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure. Thanks.
All right. Guys, I know we're all over the place. I hope you don't feel I'm taking you off tangentially into areas you really just don't have time to think about. But I honestly do believe, and that brings me to the point that's in orange here, there is a need, medium to long term, if not now, but there is a need to create and affiliate with your existing association, a business employer association that looks at your business interests. So all of these issues, insurance, CIPC registration, getting Department of Trade and Industry supply side funding into your industry so that you can train more people, you can have more technology, all of those things in your business. That is the function of a business employer association, not a traditional association. And I think that, I mean, when they put B9 down, who did they engage with and negotiate with to put B9 down? Who lobbied them? to put B9 down, because it certainly wasn't the Department of Education. And all I'm trying to say is we need them to know, we need government to know that as of today, there is an association of businesses in the childcare sector, which is affiliated in a confederation with an association of professional interests. But there is an association of businesses that is essentially is an employer association. I mean, collectively, you guys employ 300,000 people, I'm told, across the country at the very least. Well, the bottom line is, who's your employer association in that regard? Which is the organization which is dealing and giving you the kind of labor relations, the kind of legal, the kind of accounting, and the kind of insurance advice that you need, because that's not your core business. And all I'm trying to say is I really honestly believe there's a need for a business employer association to be created within the fabric of a confederation for you guys that makes sense. So the purpose of today's discussion, well, it's actually, I think the reason for that association has equally been highlighted by this discussion. But the purpose of today's discussion is what's in, I think it's purple on the right-hand side, which basically says this. It says that we need to have our standard operating protocols in place. We need to have, by law, you have to have a standard operating compliance officer identified in each business establishment. We have to establish a system of peer-to-peer moderation so that government doesn't get involved, the local government doesn't get involved, but that we do it for ourselves. We need to have a clear understanding of supply chain in terms of facilities and PPE around COVID. We need to know what the quarantine provisions are. We also need potentially to be talking collectively to the hospitals and the clinics within your areas, getting from them the kind of agreements to treat whoever you send there. And there again, we need to have indemnification with the parents put in place. From a public relations point of view, we need to tell your parents what's going on, but we need to tell the public as well in terms of our activities and our objectives in a campaign of this nature. We need to petition the parents to support our activities to reopen your establishments. And you have done that already, but we essentially need to say to you that every single parent of every single child in your institution has to give their view, because governments say, when they eventually sit across the table from us, governments say, and they will continue to say to you, they'll say to you that we can only talk to you if we can see that there has been broad consultation on a national basis across all provinces. Maybe not across all provinces, but certainly broad consultation. So petitions very much form a component of that broad consultation, as well as ongoing webinars. This is the job of work that needs to be done for you to be able to say we have exhausted our obligation as businesses to do what we need to do. And unless this is a job of work that gets done, I think you're going to find it very, very difficult, number one, to open your businesses, to remain open, or in fact, to legally be operating, particularly with things like indemnification cover. I do realize I've gone over my time. I do apologize for that. When I spoke to the guys, I said I'll do it in an hour, but we have gone over by 10 minutes. Are there any questions or anything anybody wants to raise?
Yes, Ivor, can I please?
Eric, yes, yourself.
Ivor, thank you very much. It's very enlightening. I like the militant procedure that you are proposing, because if somebody tells you nobody knows, then I always say the Lord knows, and I know that we have to do something. If we don't do something, nothing will happen. So my question is the following. I think usually that what needs to happen is we have to fire, then we have to get ready, then we aim.
And you say ask for forgiveness rather than permission.
That's fantastic. I like that. So what I say is, I think we need to fire. And firing means that somebody in the next 24 hours must go to this portal, get a certificate. If that person comes back to us, if somebody has a certificate like that, then we should en masse go and get that. That person should then say, okay, I'm going to open on Monday or whatever day or weeks. I think the 8th is perhaps a good sign. So if we begin to do that, then we can get ready, and then we can start to aim. So if we do not do that, it's going to take us 2 weeks or longer, or 3 weeks or 5 weeks, and we haven't got the time. I have to pay my people. and I'm stealing, I'm begging, I'm borrowing, I become a criminal to pay my people because they are of the utmost importance to me. So if somebody in the next 24 hours can get to that business portal, register, and have the document, we are a full way, because they can then perform the essential services, and all of us can go and do that way and say, listen, this is our certificate, we've got an essential service. Then I would also suggest, and I can see that the PR program on this is currently running, because I'm checking the newspapers, and every day now in the Afrikaans newspapers, I see that there are stuff, but it needs to be, needs to be comprehensive. After that, we must also help people that are not registered, and we must check the insurance stuff, and obviously the business employers association, that must become, that is the ready getting stuff that we have to do. So if we don't do this in 24 hours, getting a business registered and saying this is your essential service, and knowing how can we partake in, what can we do, and how can we help in the PR exercise of getting this on the forefront, I think we must leave it, because then it's going to go over. So those are just a few thoughts. Your comment, please.
I'm completely agreeing with you. And that's what I'm offering to do, to actually work with you guys to make sure that this happens. So we're saying, number one, we need to have our SOP campaign, and thank God that's been started. We need to have a certification campaign going for the SOP campaign. We need to have an insurance engagement. We need to have a parent engagement. We need to have a petition campaign. By the way, when we talk about an SOP campaign, that includes printing of posters. I know that sounds petty, but believe it or not, that becomes the most important component. And then also absolutely a training campaign among staff. And that also can be put in place, but it needs to be a focus. All of these things are critically important. Very important in this campaign. We need to have a biz portal, I'm going to say campaign, but I know what I mean in that regard, but a biz portal campaign. And that biz portal campaign, by the way, needs to be provincial, because what we are finding with biz portal, I don't know if you guys in the other provinces, I almost said the rural areas, sorry about that, but I don't know if you guys in the other provinces have found that what a company in Gauteng can get as a biz portal certificate, a company in Durban is struggling to get in exactly the same industry under exactly the same situation or criteria. And so that's where we get hold of the DTI and we say, what's going on here? What we want is we want the DTI to say that that biz portal requirement should be done centrally rather than on a one-to-one basis, because then we just give them lists and we ask them for certificates for the whole list. But that's an engagement that needs to take place. These are all the important things that need to take place at this moment in time. I think what's critically important, though, is we need to have then a graduated quality assurance approach as well, which says, right, once the businesses are running and operating, how are we going to deal with those businesses running and operating in terms of quality assurance? We obviously also have, I'm just putting it here, a medical campaign, but what I mean is the idea of actually then engaging with your healthcare facilities, your hospitals, and your clinics in your areas on a coordinated and on a centralized basis. Where I've put insurance, by the way, insurance, I'm also going to say here a broker campaign, because that's critically important. We need to know what you've got and what you haven't got. If the insurance company says to you, but hold on a moment, we contracted out of any kind of indemnification or cover for any pandemic, we want to see it in writing, because obviously the majority of you haven't seen it. Sarah, I know you've seen it, but that's because it's been brought to your attention. So these are just some of the priorities, a 10-day strategy starting Monday for argument's sake, but obviously as has previously been said before Monday, as Eric said before Monday, but this is your 10-day strategy to be up and running, so that we can actually say then, just for argument's sake, that by the 10th of June, it's business as usual.
Ivan, can I just... Ivan?
Yes, of course. Yes, Mitch, that's you, yes.
Listen, as I spoke to you yesterday, if we want to try and do something, the timing is of essence, exactly what we've said earlier on. And if we try and do it individually, the timing just becomes so much longer. But with SA Child and Anton and them, that's why I put us together. They have done, I want to say, 80% of the work. They've done the groundwork. They've got in place so that we can pick up instead of trying individually to do it. If we work together with Anton and his association, and I want to say almost like piggyback, because the majority of us know them, are affiliated with them.
And
so
they're
that
your
we can
association. They're your association.
to go with them, so we don't have everybody individually and everybody having to contact you and don't know what's happening, where we've got one centralized point, Anton and them. And again, 90% of the work has been done is there. The only problem they've had is they've done all the letters, they've sent it to government, but they haven't had the legal expertise. We might have an attorney that we've spoken to, but they don't have the legal expertise to deal with government and actually have a voice. Like you've said, is if we have now sent, if you don't respond to us, we accept this as silence and we are carrying on, so that we know we've got a legal background, legal person that's now going forward.
Can I say that this is not about legal? I hear exactly what you're saying, Misha, but let me say it's not about legal. It's about someone who understands the way government works, and more importantly, who understands how public strategy works. And so when you're talking to me, you're talking to someone who comes from government, number one. And more importantly, as far as public policy strategy is concerned, that's my area of expertise. We will always have proper legal facilities on tap, but these issues are not a matter of legal. When it comes to insurance, we'll make sure that the right kind of insurance companies or right kind of insurance lawyers are making sure you're properly indemnified. And that's what you want your association to have a finger on. And as you say, this association has done all of the work. It's just about packaging now.
Ivor, can I ask a question?
Ilana speaking.
That's Brittany, right? Or Ilana? Ilana, you first. Ilana.
Yeah. I'm on the Biz portal trying to do my registration while we're chatting. And you say B9 is our industry, but they don't number it, so they fall under each other. So when I go to B9, it is accommodation for quarantine, essential services. Is that the correct one?
So understand that there are regularly new gazettes coming out, and they have to regularly renumber. So all we'll do is we'll find the right registration for you.
Yeah, because I want to just print it as we are in this chat.
well
I'm
done.
happy to go through the process.
So you literally just need to look for it. Look for the one that starts with Care Services.
Okay. All right.
Have you found it?
So I will find the one. I haven't found it. No.
Okay, we'll sort it out. We'll do it together.
Okay.
Excellent.
It's actually Charmaine. I'm from Cape Town, from Joburg Baby College.
Brittany, yes.
Under Brittany, it's my daughter, but it's actually Charmaine.
Okay, Charmaine.
I'm on the ECD forum with Frank Manson. We in Cape Town.
Right.
Just quickly to ask you just some clarity on the insurance. Our insurance policy, we've got business interruption, then we've got public liability, employer's liability, group personal accident, and then we've got commercial umbrella liability and professional indemnity. Do I question on all those lines of cover?
Well, the real question is, do any of them exclude the others? For example, if you don't have indemnification on your business practices, how is your professional indemnity affected if you happen to work in a business that is not covered by indemnity? So that's a question you really have to ask of your insurance agents or your insurance.
Okay, so what would I ask them to give me a confirmation on all those forms of cover?
Absolutely.
Like
and I can tell you for a fact
during the COVID period.
Absolutely. Well, one of the questions the very first question you should be saying is, hey, Bill, you sold me business interruption insurance. I've been closed for 2 months. How do I apply for my business interruption cover? And that's when Bill will swallow very hard and say, oh, sorry, it's excluded. And then your next question is, but Bill, what else is excluded if that's excluded? In other words, if I go into a business where I don't have business interruption cover, do I have professional indemnity cover? And Bill will swallow and say, well,
Yes.
we don't know. I'll have to find out. And then you know what's going on.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate everything you're doing for us.
I know I'm playing devil's advocate, and I know I'm being facetious when I answer you like that, but that's unfortunately how these guys work.
No, that's the way we need to go. Thank you. We appreciate everything you're doing.
Okay, fantastic.
Ivor, can I ask a question?
Of course, Michelle.
Thank you. I'm also from Cape Town, also with regards to the insurance. So I've had a chat with my insurance company. They've said outright business interruption does not apply. What if they do not cover us or have any indemnification in this period for whatever reason?
Well, then
what is our recourse?
We've got a problem.
Scramble and look for another. Yeah.
Well, understand something. No insurance company is going to give you indemnification insurance ab initio from scratch. That's the first thing. All right. So you need to know that. And then within the context of that, you then move to the next stage, which is to say, collectively, we need to meet with the insurance council urgently to negotiate urgent cover, even if it's emergency cover only for purposes of the COVID period for businesses that want to reopen. We need to have that engagement. We cannot not have that engagement because otherwise you're trading recklessly, which is a criminal offense.
Yeah. Okay, that's my concern. Thank you.
All right. I just want to answer the previous lady. Sorry, I can't remember. I think it was under Brittany, but it's health, social, and personal services, which is the one that you'll be applying under. Health, social, and personal services. And that's on bizportal.gov.za/essential_services.aspx.
Okay, so let's see. Oh, no, I was going to click that. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm just putting it on the chat for you guys so that you can find it. It's there on the chat for you to go straight into it. All right.
Ivor, just a question.
Yes,
if you have that certificate, what can anybody do to you in this whole wide world if you have it? You are an essentials, which I think, as the fraternity and maternity of the business that we are in, is we are an essential service.
But you're listed as an essential service.
Well, the fact of the matter is, what I'm saying is, how can any person, if you get that certificate which says we are an essential service from that portal that you are talking about, the Biz portal, how can they close us down? What can they do? What legal foot do they stand on? Because of the 8 million people that are going to go to work, I can't tell you how much angst there is about people having to go back, and they've got nothing. No, they don't know where to do. They are in absolute dire straits. And I have to tell them all the time, I don't know, nobody knows. So what is going to happen if we have a test case where a person has that certificate, opens up, and we can have legal representation there? If any person comes, we can get the legal job.
Your exposure is this. Your exposure is firstly, do you have a certificate to be practicing? That's the first question, all right? The second question is this: do you have to have a license, a professional license to practice? The third question is this: has there been a directive to you, a published government gazetted directive to you not to be practicing, irrespective of what the COCTA thing says? Those are the questions. Now, in the light of that, and then the fourth question is this: you cannot open your business unless you have indemnification cover, insurance cover. So those become your 4 requirements, and we've spoken about all 4 of them.
So what you're saying is then that person that has that certificate that they've got at the Biz portal, that person can legally open because those 4 premises that you've just mentioned are being taken care of. And why don't we open if we do that? If we don't have those 4 things?
What I am saying to you is, I'm saying to you that it has to be challenged to prove that we're wrong, and whoever challenges it takes on the responsibility. So if it's the the police force won't if you've got a BizPortal certificate. So you can rule them out. If it's the Department of Social Services, it will have to be on the basis of a government gazette that countermands the COGTA Gazette. They don't have that. And so what are they going to challenge you on? That they wrote to your association, but maybe you're not a member of the association. And number two, they can't send an email to an association and say you can't open. It has to be a government gazetted piece of regulation or legislation that's in place. And all I'm trying to say is you would have a response for every one of those. Is it going to be challenged? Well, who's it going to be challenged by? If it's challenged by any government minister, it's basically saying to people who work in essential services, you can't work in essential services because there's no one to take care of your kids. And all I'm trying to say is we need to win the hearts and minds with a public relations campaign over every one of those potential negatives.
Okay, but I put it to you, sir, if I have now to do it the right way, why don't we do a test case? Who's prepared to do that and say, listen, we've got all these 4 things in out and we are opening, and even get the press and the media there to say these are the stuff so that you get open in the eye. And I'm not saying that, you know, we've what you've indicated in the whole discussion that we've had, we have the thing that yes, it's going to take 10 days, then we will be ready, but we need to fire and aim. And if you do that, a test case, and those 4 things are in place, and you have legal representation there, and you've got all the documentation there, and you have people opening up, and you have the press there, I mean, what is going to happen? What are we going to be termed as? What are we going to be looked at? I'm just asking to speed up things.
I hear what you're saying. I think what's necessary now is, and Anton, I'm not wanting to labor you with it, but I think what's necessary now is that your association amongst themselves needs to sit down and say, we've had an engagement, we've discussed it. There's a recording of this discussion, by the way, and I'll let you have that. Where to from here? What's the next steps? Anton, I'm only too happy to work with you guys because I think what you've done is absolutely fantastic. To the people who are not members of this association, to get the same benefit, you're going to have to join another association, and one doesn't exist. It's the bottom line. And so, Anton, I'm only too happy to work with you, but the guidance for where to from here is going to have to come from you guys. Ladies and gentlemen, we've gone massively over the time. I really do apologize. I am very long-winded, but it's been an absolute pleasure. It's great meeting all of you, and hopefully we can have a relationship.
Thank you, Ivan.
Very much. Appreciate it.